Wait, get this. We're diving into psychic spies.
Yeah.
Yeah, psychic spies. The U.S. Army spent like $20 million trying to weaponize psychic powers, specifically something called remote viewing.
It really is fascinating. This wasn't just some, like, fringe idea. It was a full-blown program driven by Cold War anxieties. And there
Yeah.
was actual intelligence suggesting that the Soviets were really invested in psychic research.
So what are we going to do in this deep dive? I think we should explore Project Stargate from its beginnings to its very controversial end. Right? We'll uncover the key players, the alleged successes, and of course the big question: did any of it actually work?
Well, I mean, psychic spies. Come
So-
on. It's a story filled with intrigue, contradictions, and enough what-ifs to make your head spin. So let's rewind back to the 1970s, the peak of the Cold War.
Okay.
The CIA and the DIA were getting seriously spooked by these rumors that the Soviets were pouring resources into psychotronics.
Psychotronics.
Essentially psychic warfare, think mind control, ESP, that kind of thing. They were worried about being left behind in a potential psychic arms race.
Wait, so the Soviets were spending millions on psychic research?
It seems that way.
That's wild.
Yeah, so in 1970, they launched this program called SCAN-IT, which basically meant scan by coordinate.
Scan by coordinate.
Yeah, the idea was, could someone psychically see what was happening at a specific location just by knowing its coordinates? Like a psychic Google Maps, I guess you could say.
Hold on. Psychic Google Maps.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So how did they even begin to test something like that?
Well, that's where the Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, comes in.
Okay.
They were pioneers in parapsychology research, and the government tapped them to explore this whole remote viewing thing.
I've always wondered what did a typical remote viewing session even look like? Did they have like crystal balls and incense?
Not quite so mystical. Although the whole thing is pretty out there. At SRI, you had physicists like Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ, serious scientists, but also open to the possibility of ESP. And they ended up working with some interesting figures like, Uri Geller.
What, Uri Geller?
Yeah.
The spoon bending guy.
Yes.
The U.S. government was working with a spoon bender.
It seems unbelievable, but it's true. Their work with Geller actually caught the military's attention.
Okay, but bending spoons isn't exactly spying on the enemy, is it? I mean, was there anything that suggested that this remote viewing thing could actually be useful for intelligence gathering?
Well, there was this case with a young secretary at SRI named Rosemary Smith.
Okay.
In 1976, she allegedly used remote viewing to pinpoint the location of a lost Soviet spy plane.
Wow. That's almost too good to be true. So this Rosemary Smith just sat down, concentrated, and boom, found a missing spy plane.
Well, it's difficult to prove, but,
If it's true, that's incredible. But did they ever try to replicate that success, with other viewers?
That case definitely fueled the program's early momentum. Although, it's important to note that there were skeptics from the get-go, scientists and psychologists who argued that there was no real evidence for ESP or remote viewing.
I bet they were drowned out by all the excitement, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't want their own team of psychic spies?
Yeah, well, skepticism or not, fueled by that early success and the fear of, Soviet psychic soldiers, the project kept getting funding.
Okay, so did they just start recruiting like random psychics off the street? How did they even go about building a team of psychic spies?
That's where things get really intriguing. In 1977, the Army officially launched Gondola Wish, which quickly morphed into Grill Flame, a real super secret psychic spy unit.
Okay, stop right there. A real psychic spy unit.
Yes.
Were they wearing like trench coats and reading minds? What did this Grill Flame actually do?
Picture this. A small team, maybe 15, 20 people, operating out of an old, leaky wooden barracks at Fort Meade, Maryland. Seriously. They were given constantly changing code names and trained to use their minds to spy on the enemy.
I mean, it's almost comical when you think about it. Here you have this cutting-edge, highly classified research happening in one of the most powerful militaries in the world, and it's all taking place in some rundown barracks.
The contrast is incredible, isn't it? This clandestine operation shrouded in secrecy happening in the most unlikely of settings.
Okay, so who were these psychic spies? I mean, what kind of people sign up for something like that?
Well, you had a real mix of personalities. We already mentioned Puthoff and Targ, but there were others who played key roles. Edwin May, for example. He was a central figure at SRI. Not only was he a researcher, but he was also the one judging the results of the remote viewing sessions.
Wait, he was both the researcher and the judge. Doesn't that seem like a bit of a conflict of interest?
It's an interesting point. And then there's Ingo Swann, who coined the term remote viewing and developed some of their protocols. But later, he started talking about aliens and UFOs, which understandably made some people in the program kind of nervous.
Yeah, I can see how that might raise some eyebrows.
Yeah.
So they had scientists, psychics. What about the military side of things? Were there any generals running around trying to bend spoons?
Oh, absolutely. Major General Albert Stubblebine, he was a true believer in psychic phenomena, spoon bending, attempts to walk through walls. He was convinced that psychic warfare was the future of combat.
Wait, hold on. The director of national intelligence led this project?
No, but Lieutenant General James Clapper, who led the project in the 1990s, later became the director of national intelligence.
Wow.
So it just goes to show you how far up the chain of command this whole thing went.
Okay, so we've got a spoon-bending general and someone who would later become the director of national intelligence. This is getting weirder by the minute. Tell me more about these psychic soldiers.
Yeah.
Who are these people claiming to have these extraordinary abilities?
Well, you had figures like David Morehouse, who claimed to have worked on hundreds of missions using remote viewing, from trying to locate a Soviet jet carrying a nuclear bomb to tracking down suspected double agents. And then there's Joseph McMoneagle, who supposedly honed his abilities as a kid to cope with a difficult upbringing and became, one of the top military remote viewers.
Wow, their stories sound incredible, but was there anyone who wasn't buying into all of this? Anyone raising red flags?
Oh, definitely. Plenty of skeptics within the intelligence community and the scientific world who saw the whole thing as a waste of time and money.
I bet those skeptics were having a field day with this whole thing. So with all this controversy swirling around, how did Project Stargate even manage to stay afloat for so long?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore further as we dive deeper into the secrets, controversies, and eventual downfall of Project Stargate.
So last time we left off with Project Stargate in full swing, right? A team of military personnel and civilian psychics trying to harness this power of remote viewing for espionage.
Operating out of a leaky old barracks.
Operating out of a leaky old barracks, yeah.
Can you imagine?
I'm still wrapping my head around that whole image.
It's pretty wild.
But I really want to know, like, how did they actually do this remote viewing thing? Did they just, like, sit in a dark room and concentrate really hard?
Well, they did try to bring in some scientific rigor into it. They developed a set of protocols called coordinate remote viewing, or CRV. CRV, yeah.
Okay.
To try and make psychic spying more objective.
More objective.
Less reliant on just vibes and feelings.
Okay, so walk me through this CRV then.
Sure.
What did a typical session actually look like?
Okay, so imagine this. You're in a sealed room, right?
Yeah.
No windows, minimal distractions.
Right.
And you're given a set of coordinates and absolutely no other information about the target.
Yeah.
And your task is to use your psychic abilities to see what's at that location.
To see.
To see, describe it in detail, maybe even like sketch it out.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So were they like trying to describe enemy bases or hidden weapons? What kind of targets were they looking at?
It ran the gamut.
Gamut.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to locate hostages, track down Soviet submarines, even find missing people. And according to some accounts, they had some pretty impressive hits.
Okay, like what?
Well, you remember Pat Price, the former police officer?
Yeah.
He supposedly provided detailed sketches of Soviet military installations that matched up really well with actual CIA photographs.
Hold on. So if they were getting accurate information, why was the whole project eventually shut down? What went wrong?
Well, for one thing, there's the issue of secrecy. Yeah, to avoid influencing the viewers, they rarely received any feedback on whether they were right or wrong.
Oh, okay.
So it was all about keeping their confidence high, but it also made it really hard to verify the results independently.
So they were basically flying blind. How could they even know if they were actually onto something or just making lucky guesses?
It's a good point.
Yeah.
And that lack of transparency eventually came back to bite them.
How so?
Well, in 1984, journalist Jack Anderson leaked the existence of the program to the public.
Oh.
So suddenly, Project Stargate was under intense scrutiny.
I can only imagine those headlines. Army spends millions on psychic spies.
Exactly.
That sounds like something straight out of, like, the Weekly World News or something.
It's pretty wild, right?
Yeah, I could see how that would be a PR nightmare.
For sure.
So did they try to defend the program? Was there any pushback against all the skeptics?
Oh, there was some, but
Okay.
things were starting to unravel.
Okay.
The National Academy of Sciences conducted a review in 1984, and their conclusions were not favorable.
Really?
Basically, they said that there was no scientific evidence to support the claims of remote viewing.
Ouch.
That had to hurt.
Yeah, that must have been like a blow to the program's credibility.
Sure.
But they didn't shut it down right then and there, right?
Oh, they didn't.
Okay.
It's amazing, but despite all the mounting skepticism, the program managed to limp along for another decade.
Wow.
Bouncing around from the DIA to the CIA, changing names a few times, but the core mission remained the same: to use remote viewing to gather intelligence.
It's amazing that they kept it going for so long, given, all the controversy surrounding it.
Right.
I guess when you've already invested that much time and money, it's hard to just walk away.
It is.
And I think there was still a lingering hope that maybe they were on the verge of a breakthrough.
Or breakthrough.
Yeah, that they could somehow turn these psychic abilities into a reliable intelligence tool.
It's a compelling thought.
It is. It is.
So here we are, now in the 1990s.
1990s, yeah.
What was the final nail in the coffin for Project Stargate?
What was it?
Well, the beginning of the end came in 1995.
All right.
When the CIA, which was overseeing the project at that point,
Right.
commissioned this independent review to assess its effectiveness.
Oh, okay.
So they brought in a team of statisticians, psychologists, intelligence experts to examine the data, interview the viewers, and determine once and for all if remote viewing actually worked.
So what did they find? Was this the proof they were looking for?
Well, it's not that simple.
Okay.
The review team was actually split in their conclusions.
Split.
Yeah, psychologist Jessica Utz, who is part of the team,
Okay.
she argued that there was, statistical evidence suggesting that something unusual was going on.
All right.
She believed that the remote viewers were consistently scoring above chance, hinting at some form of psychic ability.
Okay, so 1 point for the psychics.
Yeah, you could say that.
It sounds like they finally had some scientific validation.
But not so fast.
No?
Another member of the review team, psychologist Ray Hyman,
Okay.
he vehemently disagreed with Utz's conclusions.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he argued that the apparent successes were nothing more than chance, coincidence, or even subconscious bias on the part of the analysts.
Right.
He called the whole thing subjective delusion.
Okay, so we're back to square one.
Yeah,
Then
it seems like.
one scientist says it works, another says it's all in their heads.
Exactly.
So how did they resolve this impasse?
Well, that's where the American Institutes for Research, or AIR, comes in.
Wow.
AIR.
Okay.
They conducted a separate, very thorough review of the program, focusing specifically on whether the intelligence gathered through remote viewing was ever actually useful.
Okay, so did AIR come down on the side of science or the psychics?
Their report was pretty damning.
Damning.
Yeah. They stated point blank that no remote viewing report had ever provided what they called actionable intelligence. Meaning, none of the information gathered through psychic means ever led to a successful military operation or intelligence coup.
Wow, so no tangible results, no more funding.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Faced with this evidence, the CIA decided to, finally pull the plug.
Yeah.
In 1995, Project Stargate was officially terminated. And its files were declassified.
Wow.
The era of psychic spies, at least officially, was over.
What a story. From Cold War fears to spoon-bending generals and psychic soldiers trying to see the future.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's fascinating and honestly, I think a little embarrassing for the U.S. government.
It certainly is.
But the story of Project Stargate isn't just about government waste or the pursuit of fringe science, right?
No.
I think it raises some really profound questions about the limits of human perception, the nature of consciousness, and the lengths we'll go to understand the unknown.
You're absolutely right.
So even though the official program ended in 1995, the debate about remote viewing and psychic phenomena in general, it continues.
It does.
Why do you think people are still so fascinated by this?
Well, I think it's a testament to the enduring power of the unknown.
The unknown.
Yeah, there's a part of us that's always drawn to the mysterious, to the possibility that there's more to reality than meets the eye.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons why Project Stargate continues to capture our imaginations.
So welcome back to our deep dive into Project Stargate.
It's been a wild ride, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've been talking about the U.S. government's attempts to use psychic powers, specifically remote viewing for espionage.
Right, and it's a story full of, twists and turns, from Cold War anxieties to spoon-bending generals and psychic soldiers trying to see the future.
And after, decades of research, millions of dollars spent, and countless hours of psychic staring, we're left with this question, like, what does it all mean?
Yeah, what does it all mean? Even though the official program ended back in 1995, the debate about remote viewing and psychic phenomena in general, it just keeps going.
And it really makes you think, what if there's more to our world, than we can currently perceive or even measure?
It's this enduring allure of the unknown, right? I mean, we're naturally drawn to the mysterious, the possibility that there's more to reality than meets the eye.
But before we get too lost in the what ifs,
Right.
let's remember the CIA's final verdict on Project Stargate.
Not warranted.
Not warranted. They concluded that remote viewing had, no practical value for intelligence gathering because the information was often too vague and ambiguous.
They basically said, it just wasn't reliable enough to be useful.
So case closed. The skeptics win.
Well, not everyone is convinced. Some people still maintain that the government was really onto something, and perhaps there were breakthroughs that were never declassified, or maybe they deliberately downplayed the program's successes, to protect it from public scrutiny.
Ah, the old, it worked so well we had to pretend it didn't argument. Classic. But setting aside the conspiracy theories for a moment, what do those who still believe in remote viewing point to as evidence?
Well, one argument is that remote viewing is, a real phenomenon, but it's not something that you can easily control or replicate in a lab setting.
Okay.
It's more of an art than a science. It requires a certain talent or a predisposition that not everyone has.
So maybe those psychic soldiers were tapping into something real,
Mm-hmm.
but we just haven't figured out how to measure it or even understand it yet?
Right.
What about the remote viewers themselves? Do any of them still stand by their experiences all these years later?
Absolutely. You have individuals, like Joe McMoneagle and David Morehouse, who continue to assert that they use their abilities to achieve remarkable results. They talk about tracking down missing persons, locating hidden weapons, even seeing into the future.
It's hard not to be intrigued by these stories, but how do we know what's real and what's not? How can we separate genuine psychic ability from, wishful thinking or even clever storytelling?
I mean, that's the heart of the matter, isn't it? And it's a question we may never have a definitive answer to.
Yeah.
But grappling with that uncertainty, I think that's part of what makes this topic so fascinating. It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the very nature of what we consider possible.
Thinking about it, even if we could never scientifically prove remote viewing, the very idea, it raises some profound questions. I mean, if someone could genuinely see things at a distance or even into the future, what would that mean for our understanding of privacy, free will, even the nature of reality itself?
Right. It challenges our fundamental assumptions about how the world works, and it leads to some pretty, mind-bending possibilities.
Not to mention, like, the ethical implications. I mean,
yeah.
if you could use remote viewing to spy on people, to gather information without their knowledge or consent, I mean, where would you draw the line?
It's a slippery slope with potentially serious consequences.
It seems like the more we learn about the brain and human consciousness, the more mysteries we uncover.
It really does.
Who knows what
Go
the
ahead.
future holds?
Fair.
Maybe one day we'll have concrete proof that remote viewing is real. Or maybe it will remain one of those, enduring enigmas that capture our imaginations but ultimately elude our grasp.
Either way, the story of Project Stargate serves as a powerful reminder that there's still so much we don't know about ourselves and the universe.
It encourages us to stay curious, to question our assumptions, and to remain open to the possibility that reality might be far stranger and more wondrous than we currently imagine. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Project Stargate. Thank you for joining us as we explored the world of psychic spies, government secrets, and the enduring mystery of the human mind.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope this has left you with some food for thought and perhaps a renewed sense of wonder about the unknown.
Keep those minds open.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep an open mind.